Hello everyone, and welcome to the 2020-2021 Utah Futures FAFSA walkthrough. My name is Jacob Newman, and I'm a paying for college expert with Utah Futures and the Utah Higher Education Assistance Authority. I'm going to guide you through the FAFSA so that you can complete the FAFSA completely and accurately in a timely fashion. Before beginning your 2020-2021 FAFSA, if you are the student, you will need to create what's called an FSA ID. This is the username and password that you will use to complete the FAFSA each year that you are in college. Go to fsaid.ed.gov to create your FSA ID. If you are a dependent student on the FAFSA, which means that you must provide parent information, one of your parents will also need to create an FSA ID as well. For the purpose of this walkthrough, however, I am going to say I am the parent, preparer, or student from a freely associated state, so you can see what it looks like. I'm going to enter in my information. This is just saying that you will use this information for good purposes to pay for your post-secondary education. You're going to go ahead and hit accept. If you plan to attend college in the fall of 2020, you are going to complete the 2020-2021 FAFSA. Now we're going to create a save key, which is a 4 to 8 character password in case you need to come back. This contains some frequently asked questions about the FAFSA, which can also be found throughout the FAFSA itself. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Remember that in this portion, it's going to be the student information. So you're going to enter your information. You're going to confirm that this demographic information is correct. You're going to enter your email address. Make sure you use a permanent email address and not a school email address that might disappear. You're going to enter a permanent mailing address. It's going to ask if you have lived in the state that you are in for at least 5 years. It's going to ask if you are a U.S. citizen. You can answer in one of 3 ways. You can say, yes, I am a U.S. citizen or a U.S. national. No, but I am an eligible non-citizen. This is an individual who has a green card or is a refugee or asylee. Or you can answer, no, I am not a citizen or eligible non-citizen. It's going to ask about high school completion status, as well as what degree or certificate you'll be working on when you begin the 2020-2021 school year. For Miles, we're going to say that he is going to start his first bachelor's degree. Even if you have concurrent enrollment, before you begin college, you are going to say never attended college if this is your first year in college. We always recommend that students say yes if they are interested in being considered for work study. This is an opportunity where students can get a job on campus and use that money to pay for their educational expenses. It's going to ask if you're male or female, and this is as assigned on your birth certificate. Male citizens between the ages of 18 to 26 need to register with the Selective Service System or the draft in order to receive federal financial aid. We're going to say that Miles is not registered, but this gives you an opportunity to register right within the FAFSA itself. If you have not turned 18 yet, this will save you a trip to the post office because you will be required to register. It's going to ask for your driver's license number, if you have one. It's going to ask, are you a foster youth or were you at any time in the foster care system? And it's also going to ask about the highest school completed by both of your parents. And these are birth parents, and it does have the option for other or unknown if you do not know. Next, it's going to ask about your high school completion, and it's going to ask what is the name of your high school. It's going to give you the function to search. If your high school is a newer high school, you might not be able to find it in the search function. That's okay. Just enter the name, the city, and the state, and then press next. Now we're going to provide the information for the colleges that we are considering attending. So in Miles' case, he wants to stay in state here in Utah. We're going to say Salt Lake City. We're going to first of all put in the University of Utah. And then it will give you the option to add more schools. So we're going to say he wants to maybe go to Utah Valley University. Then it's going to ask about housing plans. It's going to give you three options. It's going to give you on campus, with parent, and off campus. This will just help the school determine what's called your cost of attendance, or how much it will cost for you to attend that school depending on where you live. I'm going to say that he's going to live with parent at the University of Utah. If he attends Utah Valley University, he's going to live off campus. It's going to ask for the student's marital status. It's going to ask if you will have children or dependents. It's going to ask if this because it's going to determine if you will be required to provide your parents' financial information on the FAFSA. We're going to hit no to both of these since Miles does not have children who receive more than half of their support from him or dependents. Then it's going to give you a checklist of questions that you'll need to answer. These will also determine if you need to provide parental financial information on the FAFSA. This includes serving on active duty, veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. Have you been in foster care? Are both your parents deceased, or were you a ward of the court since turning age 13? As determined by a court of legal, in the state of your legal residence, are you or were you an emancipated minor? Does someone other than your parent or step-parent have legal guardianship of you as determined by a court in your state of legal residence? We're going to hit none of the above. It's also going to ask if you were homeless or self-supporting or at risk of being homeless. So in this instance, if you have questions about this, you can hit this little question mark box. I'm going to say no. This is basically saying that you need to provide parental information on the FAFSA. If you feel like you have a special circumstance, you can say, I am unable to provide information about my parents, and you can follow up with the college or university's financial aid office to describe your special circumstance. Your parents' refusal to provide information on the FAFSA is not considered a special circumstance, however. So I'm going to say I will provide information about my parents. It's going to ask for the marital status of your parents. We're going to say married or remarried. It's going to ask when they got married, the month and the year. Then it's going to ask for your parents' social security number, last name, first initial, date of birth, and parents' email address. If your parents are not U.S. citizens or don't have social security numbers, you're going to enter all zeros for the social security numbers. Never enter what's called an individual taxpayer identification number. Always enter all zeros if your parents do not have a social security number. Going to ask for information for your other parent. going to ask if your parents lived in Utah or the state that you were in for at least 5 years. Now it's going to determine household size. So it will say that your parents are included in there, you are included in there, and it's going to include your parents' other children if they are considered what is considered dependent on the FAFSA, so they weren't able to answer yes to any of those questions earlier in the FAFSA, and your parents provide at least half of their support from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. In Miles' case, we're going to say he has none of these. You can also include other people. If they live with your parents provide more than half of their support, and your parents will continue to provide more than half of their support from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. So this could be aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, if your parents are providing more than half of their support, but they're not considered in this category. It's also going to ask about the number in college, and it says do not include your parents. So we're just going to say there's one in college, and that's going to be Miles. Hit next. Now it's going to ask about your parents' tax filing status for 2018. We're going to say they've already completed their IRS tax return. It's going to ask what kind of tax return they filed in 2018, and there are three options. An IRS 1040, since with tax reform, all tax forms are now IRS 1040s. A foreign tax return, an IRS 1040-NR or an IRS 1040-NR-EZ, or a tax return with Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, or a freely associated state. We're going to say an IRS 1040 in this case, and they filed as married, filing jointly. It's going to ask if we want to link to the IRS. In order to use the IRS data retrieval tool, one of your parents will need that FSA ID, that username and password, so that they can link to the IRS. Since this is a demonstration site, I can't show you what the data retrieval tool will look like, but a few pieces of advice with the data retrieval tool. Make sure that your parent's address is entered exactly as it appeared on their 1040 in 2018. So, for example, if your parents live at 1234 South, 300 West, if South and West are written out, that rather than put as S and W, that will make a difference. So it needs to be entered exactly as it appears on the 1040, even if that information is incorrect or has since changed. So if your parents moved and they filed their 1040 at a different address, you're going to enter that address in there, even if your permanent mailing address has since changed. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and I'm going to enter the tax information manually. It's going to ask for your parents' adjusted gross income. If you have a copy of the 1040, that's found on line 7. It's going to ask what parent 1 and parent 2 made from working. You can find this on their W-2s. If your income meets a certain threshold, it's going to ask a question here that you need to pay attention to. You indicated that your parents filed an IRS 1040. Did your parents file a Schedule 1? With tax reform, the 1040 changed. There used to be 1040 EZs and 1040 As, which were essentially simplified versions of the 1040. Now there are a series of schedules that individuals will file with their taxes. And this is asking if your parents filed a 1040 Schedule 1. So you can select no if your parents did not file one, or if they filed it to report an Alaska Permanent Fund dividend, and there are some other exceptions. You can hit yes, no, or don't know. In this case, I'm going to hit don't know. It's going to ask if either of your parents is a dislocated worker. So that means if they've been laid off, or if they know that they're going to be laid off. I'm going to hit no here. If your income is at a certain threshold, it's going to ask if you received any of these benefits. So Medicaid, SSI, SNAP, free or reduced lunch, TANF, or WIC. I'm going to hit none of the above, just so I can give you the full FAFSA. It's going to ask for the amount of your parents' income tax for 2018, and you can find this on IRS 1040 line 13. Now it's going to ask if your parents have had any of the following items. So we're talking combat pay, if your parents received grants or scholarships reported to the IRS, education credits, which they can find on Schedule 3, line 50, untaxed portions of IRA distributions from pensions, IRA deductions and payments to self-employment, simple or other qualified plans, tax-exempt interest. It tells you exactly where to find these in the 1040. If your parents paid child support, you enter that information here for the year. So in a lot of cases, people will have a monthly payment that they pay, and then they can determine how much they paid in 2018 by doing a little bit of math right here. If your parents have any earnings under a cooperative education program, or if your parents had any taxable earnings from need-based employment programs such as federal work study. This will not usually be applicable for your parents, but if you are a returning college student, you're going to want to pay close attention to this when we get to the student financial information section. I'm going to go ahead and hit next. If your parents received child support for any children, if they had any living allowances paid to military, clergy, or others, payments to tax-deferred pension or retirement savings plan, which you can find on the W-2, veterans non-education benefits, other untaxed income, such as workers' compensation, disability benefits, etc. If you have questions about any of these, you can hit this little question mark box, and it will give you a little bit more information. Now it's going to ask about your parents' assets, and this is a question that can trip people up sometimes. So I'm going to give you a breakdown of what it means to be an asset and what it does not mean to be an asset. So it's going to ask for your parents' current balance of cash, savings, and checking. And then it's going to ask for your parents' investment, including real estate, but this does not include your parents' home. So this also does not include any of their retirement savings. This is only stocks or bonds that are held outside of a 401k, or if they have a rental property or other property. And it will give you information on how you can calculate the value of that if you click this little question mark box here. As of today, what is the net worth of your parents' current business and or investment farms? You're not going to include a family farm or a family business with 100 or fewer full-time employees. So the FAFSA will use some skip logic, and if the assets don't exceed this amount, you don't have to provide the breakdown of this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit no right here. Now it's going to ask about the student financial information, and it's going to ask if the student has completed the IRS tax return for 2018 or not. So we're going to go ahead and hit not going to file and hit next. It's going to ask how much you earned from working in 2018. I'm just going to put $500. It's going to ask if the student paid child support, or if they have earnings under a cooperative education program, or taxable earnings from need-based employment programs such as federal work study. If you received federal work study in the past year, as a college student, you're going to want to put that amount that you earned here because that's going to be advantageous for you on the FAFSA. We're going to go ahead and hit next. Then it's going to ask some very similar questions like we asked about your parents earlier. So child support received, living allowances paid to the military, clergy, and others, payments to tax-deferred pension plans, veterans non-education benefits, other untaxed income, such as workers' compensation, disability benefits, money received or paid on your behalf, not reported on this form. Sometimes you can see people have this if it's money that you received from a parent or other person whose financial information is not reported on this form and that is not part of a legal child support agreement. If you ever have questions about who your parent is, they will also provide some information earlier in the FAFSA about which parent financial information you need to provide. Now it's going to ask the student for the current balance of their cash, saving, and checking accounts. We're going to say that Miles has about $300. Net worth of investments. Miles doesn't have any stocks or bonds. Miles doesn't own a small business. He's too busy being Spider-Man. Now the application is going to ask if you are a preparer. So this was if someone was filling out the FAFSA for you, or maybe if you were paying someone to fill out the FAFSA, you should never pay anyone to help you fill out the FAFSA because the first word in FAFSA is free. So we're going to go ahead and hit next. This will give Miles a chance to review his information on his FAFSA. So if he needs to make a correction or anything, he can click on one of these and he can go back and make that correction, or if he needs to add another school. Just a nice summary of everything that we put on the FAFSA. If you use the IRS data retrieval tool, this information up here will probably say transferred from the IRS. We're going to go ahead and hit next. Now, both the student and the parent need to provide signatures on the FAFSA. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit provide student signature. This is just saying that you will use the information on this form for good purposes, essentially, that you provided the information to the best of your ability and that you're going to use it to pay for your post-secondary education. You can go ahead and hit next. In this case, it will prompt you to provide the FSA ID, that username and password that you created earlier. Since this is a demonstration site, I don't have a FSA ID for Miles Morales. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to say submit without signatures, but notice there are some other options here. There is print a signature page, and I'm going to talk about that one in just a second if you have parents who do not have social security numbers. We're going to go ahead and hit next. We're going to go ahead and hit provide parent signature. In an ideal circumstance, one of your parents will have that FSA ID, that username and password, so they can sign it digitally. We're going to say sign as parent 1. Saying they provided the information to the best of their ability. We're going to hit agree and hit next. They would enter in their FSA ID username and password. If your parents don't have a social security number, remember they're going to want to enter all zeros for the social earlier in the FAFSA. We're going to hit other options to sign and submit. If your parents don't have a social security number, like I mentioned, you can hit print a signature page and you can hit next. I'm going to do this for the purposes of this demonstration. The signature page will take a little while to process, and I'm going to show you what it's going to look like. What you will do is you will print this signature page. If the student signed with their FSA ID, it will say not required to sign, and then you'll provide a parent signature and a date, and you will mail it to this address that is listed. It will prompt you to print it. The most important thing to do with this is that after you print the signature page, you must submit your FAFSA. So I'm going to show you what the confirmation page looks like now. Your FAFSA won't be able to be processed and complete until you have signatures from both the student and the parent. So after you get that, hopefully with the FSA ID, that username and password that you created earlier, you're going to hit submit my FAFSA now. It's going to take a minute to process the data. You will receive an email confirmation page that looks like this as well. It will just give you some instructions on what will happen next. It will take 3 to 5 business days to process. You receive an email once it's processed, and then you can go in and make any corrections that you need to. It will send the information to your schools, and then those schools will prepare what's called a financial aid award offer, and that offer will include all of the aid that you're eligible for, including grants, work study, and federal student loans. So we're going to go ahead and scroll down here. The estimated family contribution, since this is a demonstration site, it does not actually calculate the EFC. This is an index number that the federal government uses to determine financial need. So based on this eligibility criteria, it looks like Miles would maybe be eligible to receive a partial Pell Grant, as well as some federal student loans, but his institutions will let him know all of the aid that he is eligible for. Gives some information about the schools at the end. And then it says, if you have questions, you can visit studentaid.ed.gov/FAFSA help. And I hope that this FAFSA walkthrough was helpful for you. If you have any questions, you can feel free to leave a comment in the comment section, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Good luck with your FAFSA.